I never thought a scam could destroy more than just my bank account. I thought scams were about losing money, maybe your savings, maybe your pride, but never your entire career. I had worked hard for years to build a stable job, climbing slowly but steadily in my field, and I thought I was safe. But safety is an illusion when scammers know how to target your trust, your desperation, and your routine. It started with something as simple as an email. The subject line read, "Company expansion. Work from home opportunities." It wasn't like the usual spam I had seen before. This one had my company's logo, the same professional formatting, and even the same email signature that my manager used. At first glance, it looked legitimate, as if my company's HR department was reaching out with an internal opportunity. I clicked it without hesitation, not knowing I was walking into a trap. The email explained that because of restructuring and new digital projects, the company was launching remote freelance opportunities for employees who wanted extra income. They framed it like a test program for people who could handle independent tasks. It was smartly written, formal enough to feel professional, but casual enough to feel personal. They even had links that redirected me to what looked exactly like my company's intranet portal. My guard was down. I thought this was my employer offering me a chance to prove my skills. The tasks sounded simple: process small client transactions, handle remote account verifications, and submit progress reports. It felt like an extension of what I already did at work. The only difference was that they promised bonuses, quick payments for each completed task. At the time, I was struggling financially. My hours had been cut back, bills were piling up, and the thought of a little extra money without leaving my home felt like the perfect solution. So I signed up. I filled out the forms, gave them my employee ID, and even uploaded copies of my work documents because they said it was needed for verification. Looking back now, that was the exact moment I handed my career into the hands of scammers. For the first week, everything seemed fine. They sent me small tasks, double-checking numbers, updating what looked like client files, processing transactions that were supposedly test cases. And true to their promise, I received payments. Real money, deposited into my account. That was their hook. Reel me in with small wins so I'd trust them fully. Then things escalated. They sent me larger tasks involving bigger sums of money. They explained that I was helping the company handle overflow by transferring client funds, making purchases on behalf of departments, and documenting transactions. I believed them because they used the same language my actual workplace used in reports. The instructions even had my company's official logo on them. To me, it felt like I was doing legitimate work. What I didn't know was that I had been turned into a money mule for a criminal operation. The scammers were laundering money through my account, and every task I completed was evidence stacking up against me. 2 weeks later, everything came crashing down. My real manager called me into his office and asked why certain client accounts were flagged with suspicious transactions under my name. My heart sank. I tried to explain about the emails and the tasks, but my manager looked at me with confusion and disbelief. He showed me the internal records. Money transfers I had processed were being flagged as fraud. Clients were filing complaints, and every trail led back to me. I panicked. I tried to show him the emails, the portal, the payments I had received. But to the company, it looked like I had gone rogue, using company access to commit fraud for personal gain. The scammers had set me up perfectly. They used my own identity to commit crimes, and I was left holding the bag. By the end of that week, I was terminated. Just like that. Years of loyalty, gone in a moment. I walked out of the office with a box of my belongings and a reputation I couldn't defend. It felt like I had lost everything. Not just a job, but my identity, my trust in myself, and my belief that I could spot danger before it reached me. But that was only the beginning, because losing my job wasn't the worst part. What came after nearly destroyed me. The days after losing my job felt like a nightmare that wouldn't end. At first, I was still in shock. I thought maybe once the company investigated further, they would realize I wasn't the one orchestrating the fraud. I kept waiting for someone to call me back, to tell me they had figured out it was all a scam and that I could come back. That call never came. Instead, I was left with silence. And in that silence, the panic began to grow. Rent was due, bills kept arriving, and I had no income. Worse, when I started looking for a new job, I realized my reputation had been destroyed. Every application I sent out ended the same way. Either I heard nothing back at all, or I was politely told they couldn't move forward. Word spreads fast in certain industries. Once people believed I had been involved in fraud, No one wanted to take the risk of hiring me. I was angry. At the scammers, at myself, even at my former company. How could they believe I would ever do something like that? How could I have been so blind? Nights became the hardest. I would lie awake replaying every decision in my head. The moment I clicked that email, the forms I filled out, the tasks I completed. Each memory was like a knife, cutting deeper into the reality of how badly I had been deceived. But the nightmare didn't stop there. A month later, I received a letter that made my stomach drop. It wasn't from my old employer. It was from law enforcement. They wanted me to come in for questioning. The scammers hadn't just ruined my career. They had left me entangled in a criminal investigation. When I sat in that cold, gray interrogation room, I realized how deep this went. The investigators weren't cruel, but they were suspicious. They asked me to explain why money had flowed through my account, why I had processed transactions flagged as fraudulent, and why I hadn't reported it sooner. I tried to explain the emails, the portal, the payments I thought were legitimate, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. To them, I wasn't a victim. I was a potential accomplice. Leaving that building, I felt smaller than ever. My future was no longer in my hands. Even if I avoided charges, I knew no employer would ever trust me again. The scammers hadn't just stolen my job. They had stolen my credibility. As weeks turned into months, the financial strain became unbearable. I had some savings, but they vanished quickly. I fell behind on rent. My car was repossessed. I sold furniture just to buy groceries. The scammers had disappeared without a trace, but the wreckage they left behind was mine to carry. And then came the cruelest twist of all. They weren't finished with me. One evening, as I was scrolling through my emails, I saw a new message that made my blood run cold. It was from the same scammers. Except this time, they didn't pretend to be my employer. This time, they threatened me. They claimed they still had my personal information, my IDs, my financial details. If I didn't cooperate with them again, they would leak everything to the authorities and to the public. In that moment, I realized just how dangerous this was. I wasn't just a victim who had been tricked once. I was now trapped in an ongoing cycle of manipulation. They weren't satisfied with ruining my job and reputation. They wanted to keep controlling me, feeding off my fear, and using my identity until nothing was left. That night, sitting in the dark of my tiny apartment, I realized I was facing a choice. Either stay silent and let them destroy what little I had left, or find a way to fight back. And that's when the real battle began. The threats from the scammers pushed me into a corner. I knew if I ignored them, they could release my information and make everything worse. But if I obeyed, I would only be giving them more control over my life. For days, I felt paralyzed, stuck between two impossible choices. That's when I decided enough was enough. I couldn't undo the past, but I could try to take back control of my future. I began researching everything I could about online scams, phishing schemes, and cybercrime. I stayed up until dawn, reading articles, victim stories, and even law enforcement reports. The more I learned, the clearer it became I wasn't alone. Thousands of people had been trapped by similar scams. Some lost money, some lost their jobs, some even lost their homes. But the pattern was always the same. The scammers thrived on silence. Victims were too embarrassed, too afraid, or too ashamed to speak up, and that silence gave the scammers power. I realized that if I wanted to stop them, I needed to do the one thing they didn't expect: expose them. I took all the emails, the fake portals, the threats, and handed everything over to the investigators who had once questioned me. This time, I wasn't on the defensive. I was determined to show them the full scale of the scam. To my relief, they listened. Slowly, the weight of suspicion shifted. I wasn't just another employee caught in the middle of fraud. I was a victim and a witness. The investigation didn't move quickly, but it moved. And as it did, I began rebuilding myself piece by piece. I picked up freelance work, small gigs that didn't require background checks or corporate references. I swallowed my pride and explained my situation to friends, some of whom stepped in to help me with food and rent. Every day was a battle, but every day was also a reminder that the scammers hadn't completely won. Months later, I received a call that nearly brought me to tears. The investigators had traced the scammers back to an organized network overseas. They weren't sure they could prosecute them all, but the evidence I provided was crucial in uncovering their tactics. It didn't erase my losses, but it gave me a sense of justice I thought I'd never feel again. And as I looked back on everything, I realized the deepest wound wasn't losing my job. It was losing my sense of trust. Trust in emails, trust in employers, trust in myself. That's what scams do. They don't just take your money or your career, they rob you of the simple confidence you once had in your own decisions. But here's the part the scammers never saw coming. Their attack lit a fire in me. I started sharing my story online, warning others about the dangers of employment scams, phishing, and identity theft. People began reaching out to me. Some had lost money. Others had nearly fallen for the same tricks. Each time, I told them the truth. You are not stupid. You are not alone. Scammers are professionals at manipulation, and anyone can be deceived. I can't say I've fully recovered. The job I lost was supposed to be my future, and I'm still climbing out of the hole they threw me into. But I refuse to let them silence me. If I can stop even one person from clicking that link, from filling out that fake form, from trusting the wrong message, then maybe everything I went through will mean something. So here I am, telling the world, I lost my job because of scammers, but I won't lose my voice. If you found this story eye-opening, please share it with others. The more people know, the harder it becomes for scammers to succeed. And if you've experienced something similar, share your story in the comments. You never know who you might help.